Brought to you in association with Grendel Press. This is Werewolf the Podcast, a serial killer drama.
You are just a type of great ape. A big, fucking, stupid, dirty, hairy, arsed monkey. Alright, half of me is too. You look upon the beautiful earth and cast your shit at it like the chimps at the zoo. You've been nothing particularly special for a very long time, just another low-rated snack on the predator's smorgasbord. A lot of you fools try to pretend that you have not evolved. Fuck's sake. Really? The very thing that you have evolved, a big brain, and this capacity to make up and share fictions, is the thing that stops you believing that you evolved. Thick as extremely thick pig shit for the cleverest being on earth, huh? Fuck's sake, guys, get it. You're nothing special. You say that you were created by some god or other perfect thing, that they have no links with the other great apes. You religious freaks and stuff are stupid and broken-minded, believing the bullshit that you've been fed. I'm afraid you're very wrong. Most of you are weak-minded monkeys who have come from fucking lower life forms that should engender more respect than the filthy, murderous, overpopulated species that you are and have become. Pretty much, things that look like human beings or homos, no, not gay things, that's been around a lot longer, have been on the earth for about 250,000 years. Things like you wandered around Africa a long time before you got all, thinking and shit. They even had a bigger fucking brain. Yeah, they did. They had bigger fucking brains than you do now. You may have de-evolved. Why homo? It's what biologists do to try and catalogue different species into families that have a common lineage. They use Latin to describe a genus of an organism. Latin is like dead clever, that's why they use it, and normal people don't know it, so it makes them sound cleverer. The Latin is the homo part of the name in this case, and throughout evolution and history, there has been an awful lot of homos. All the homos have come from a common ancestor. In your case, at some point just 5 or 6 million years ago, your ancestral chimp-like mother had 2 daughters. One that led to the evolution of the chimp, and one that led to the humans, or Latin, homos. Oh, and I'm not just talking about Homo sapiens at this point. There used to be a lot of different species with the genus Homo. It's only recently that we see the Homo sapiens as a singular and dominant species within that genus. In fact, it's only a recent thing that the other species have gone. 10,000 years ago, they think or know other species of Homo walked the earth at the same time as you sapiens. As you sapiens were starting agriculture. You were not unique. In fact, you fuckers are probably the reason they no longer exist. Other species of note were Homo neanderthalis, Homo erectus, Homo soloensis, Homo rudolfensis, Homo augusta, Homo florensis, and Homo denisovan. These are some of the homos that we found. But maybe there are a whole lot more out there that have never been discovered. You murdered them first, and then hid the bodies. Fossils and bits of creatures do not keep very well, so probably many more species have just been lost and rotted away, never to be found. You are thought to be the only line of homos left. For 2 million years, Homo sapiens shared the earth with other Homo species. Then they disappeared because your species killed them off. So, Why the fuck did the others die off? What the fuck did you guys do, you humanitarians? Well, it was the mass genocide of the other species of Homo that you seemed to undertake. You were the murderous sapiens species that destroyed others as you moved into the poor fuckers' homelands. Modern research shows that there is a small part of Neanderthal DNA in modern European people, that there is also a tiny percentage of Denisovan DNA in the people of Australasia. The Denisovans were also a lot more advanced a lot earlier than you Homo sapiens. Evidence from the Denisova cave in the Altai region of Siberia has the first ever stone bracelet. It's thought to be a torque made from greenstone and is 65,000 to 70,000 years old. This is way before you guys were making anything pretty. Also, looking at the way it was made, we really can't work out how it was done. It appears to have been made by a set drill. This is a drill that was held in one position. It was also rotating at very high speed, far faster than we would consider for the technology of the time. These kinds of tools were thought not to exist for tens of thousands of years after this date. They weren't so dumb, the Denisovans, were they? Still, you killed them off. The amount of shared DNA with other Homo species is not significant enough to support the idea that modern humans came into an area and mixed with the local species. It shows that early on in their entry to these places that they could mate with and produce fertile offspring, but that probably this soon ended and that two groups would become separate species. So the moralistic and ethical human line that we see today is actually born of destroying their brothers and sisters. The other members of their family were wiped from the earth pretty quickly when you moved into an area. The nice but wrong scientists state that Homo sapiens outcompeted the other species for resources, that sapiens were often found in larger bands that could work together more effectively, that they had better technology than the other species, so competition wiped the others out. The nasty thinking, correct scientists have a more realistic view of what happened. You murderous bastards destroyed them all, wiped them from the face of the earth, killed them, and using my newly coined term, extinctified them. This fact is not surprising looking more closely at humans now, where we can see that there is no tolerance of difference. If you do not belong, then you are nothing. Look at racism, religious hatred, homophobia, etc., etc., etc. That is within the same species. Look at the soccer fans of the UK. The strength of being bonded in a tribe would allow them to undertake horrendous actions for no other reason than they support a different bunch of overpaid toe-poking sports wankers than another group. Homo sapiens wiped out all the other Homo species. Maybe they shared DNA is born of the rape of the other species, probable in my eyes. Humans give themselves the moral high ground, the belief in rights and ethics and all that shit. They would question mine. But in reality, their entire species is born of murder and destruction of their own family tree. The morals they espouse are to be followed in only a certain set of situations. You hit Australia some 45,000 years ago and you wiped out all the large creatures very quickly. You hit America 16,000 years ago and did the same. And you are still fucking doing it to the point where you're going to annihilate your dumbass selves. With the advent of fire, one single individual of your species could devastate a whole habitat. By burning it, one of you could kill off thousands and thousands of organisms in one go. Why are you doing this? Well, from my unwarranted opinion, you guys are weak, pathetic creatures who with the accident of consciousness got to the top of the food pyramid while not being physically prepared for it. Other predators took thousands of years to evolve to that stage. They evolved the teeth, the claws, and the predator's mindset. Not fucking consciousness. You, for a long time in your earlier career, were low to the base level of the food pyramid. You had to wait for the scraps from the table of the other predators. You were waiting to get to the bones of the creature that had already been stripped bare. You ate the fucking leftovers, the bone marrow of the emptied carcasses. Then you became top, laughably, dog. The world had not got the developed checks that it had for the other predators for your species, and mountain lion population would decrease if it hunted too many prey due to starvation. This reduction in mountain lions would then allow the prey species population to recover. The prey would not be hunted in such large numbers, which would mean that that species could then breed and the population would grow. The more prey, then there is much more food for more lions. More lions would be born due to the glut of food, and so on. This prey and predator link held the mountain lion's population in a fluctuating check. This does not work for you. Once you had depleted a food source from the area, you just move on to the next resource or choose another species to eat. You just fuck it up and move on. You became top of the food chain in most food webs and pyramids. You were able to cooperate, and with the invention of the tools that you used to attack and prepare food, you were able to take on together almost any other organism and beat them. Not only that, but with your intellect you could reap the rewards from many different species and not rely on any one in particular. Well, you could do that until there were too many of you, so you had to become fucking farmers. Well, maybe I got that wrong. Maybe becoming farmers meant that there were too many of you. I don't care. The problem with your quick development of the intellectual self is that you still in a lot of ways have the mind of the hunter-gatherer and the mind of the weak prey species. Now, look at you in the modern age. You are dying in droves because of your hunter-gatherer minds. You are dying of obesity? You are now dying of eating high-calorie foods that mean that you get fat and you die of it. You lack exercise and you lack the ability to be able to control your drives. You eat and eat until you die of gluttony. Your mind is that of the hunter-gatherer. You eat the food that is there because tomorrow there may be no food. You choose sweet and high-fat foods because they contain the most calories, and you choose them because the body has deemed them to be the tastiest food. You eat yourself to death. Oh, and we help the poor do this by making highly processed, high-calorific food cheap, while healthier, unprocessed foods are expensive. Crazy if you think about it. Fat monkeys are dying of heart issues. You are fucking omnivorous too, which means that you could go into almost any other creature's habitat and steal its resources until that interlinked system fails. When they do fail, then you simply move on to the next system or the next food species. Not only that, but you would get together with your buddies and wipe out the competition for that resource with the tools like fire and spears and shit. This fire also allowed you to pre-digest the food that you ate. This meant that you could eat things that before cooking were not available to you. For example, grass seeds like wheat. You could now cook them so that they could be digested by your gut. The cooking would also reduce the number of parasites and bacteria your food contained, meaning you could eat older foods and foods that would normally cause you harm. This also meant that it took a lot less effort to get the energy from the food. Without fire, you would all be doing a lot more masticating. That means chewing, you dirty-minded monkey fuck, not wanking. To break down the food, tough fibrous foods, heating them up really helps. You would also need a much longer gut to absorb the nutrients if they weren't cooked. This would be very energy consuming in itself, so with the advent of cooking came the cognitive leap. The brain now could get enough energy much more easily to develop. Fire and cooking led to these big brains and the so-called intelligence that we see your species now have. Most species of the world have their social systems based in their DNA. To change behaviour, they need to have their genes mutate. In humans, with the cognitive breakthrough, this changed. You humans could change behaviour by social construction, systems that are thought about and made up, but accepted and supported by the group will be followed. You are the first creatures to be able to do that, and that is why you are so very adaptable. You can also change your minds and follow a different system of behaviours if needed. You fit in with your peers in order to be one of the sheeple. I know, sheeple, overused term. Never stand out, never be special, which is a shame because at birth you could be the one that changes the world. The nature of being human is to do the unexpected, and every birth has the possibility of a changed world. Hannah Arendt. But you don't want to fall into the trap that Heidegger noticed. You are thrown into the world unknowing and spend most of it not noticing yourself in being and not really noticing that you are alive. You don't live for the simple sake of living. You really have a lot of freedom to choose, but you don't. You live to suit those around you as a general process. You fit the society you come into and accept the archaic attitudes of those around you as the standards to follow. You also accept the practical necessities that are forced upon you, even though they are not of your making. Very few people ever stop and just wonder at their sheer existence. Only in moments of existential crisis do you actually see how strange the world is. Otherwise, you humans just accept this crazy place as is. It's fucking bizarre, you weirdos. Look at the great philosopher Ferris Bueller. Life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it. The makers of that film recognised it and preached it, but you think it's just a funny line. It's the truth. No. You just accept that the rules and the ideas that you are thrown into have to be followed, even though they are just made up by society to keep you in line. You also don't see the connections. You are connected as a being to everything else around you, yet you cause little change. You accept your weak individual path. Your ego is small and not powerful enough to drive you. You treat the people around you as a means. You treat nature as a means, while in fact they should be treated more like the ends. You have to recognize that all around you is in being with you, just because they are in the now with you. You are all being at one and the same time. This means unity of all, as you all have one thing in common at that moment. You are all being. If you got an understanding of this, you would enjoy the here and the now in the now, instead of in the past and the future. You do not have a lot of time before it's over. So you sheeple could be themselves if you wish to, but in reality, you just slip into the societal system and become they self, one of them. This is all true for you, unlike me. Humans are mortal. I suppose if you describe me, I am amortal. I can only die if destroyed by accident or by the endeavour of others. All humans can produce the improbable. They just don't, because they accept the made-up societal norms of others. All humans are unique. They can choose to act in certain ways. They begin with the ability to change the world and are then pushed down routes that remove those possibilities. They drive themselves into obscurity. They have innate uniqueness and then they ruin it by fitting in and taking on the inadequacies of others. They are a miracle. Being born is a miracle. Humans can choose to act unlike animals. They don't have to work on instinct and animalistic behaviours, and then they ruin it. They have free will. They can choose to give their life for another. They can choose to harm themselves. They have the freedom to choose. I call an animal, a species, an individual corrupt when it loses its instincts, when it chooses, when it prefers what is harmful to it. Nietzsche, the Antichrist. Humans have decided that they are the pinnacle of evolution. If they don't believe the truth of evolution, then for thousands of years religion has put you as the masters of the earth with all other creatures there to serve your needs. You claim to be the only rational and moral species in the mix of all others, and those others are red of tooth and claw. No, it's all wrong. You're not superior in my eyes by living by made-up morals and stories, or by placing yourself above the others that live on instincts. You have become weakened and pathetic, sickly and lost, yet sadly, the most interesting of all creatures. When you came together to coexist, you set up rules and laws that you could be punished for and chastised for by others. This set of made-up rules is not seen in other creatures. The problem with this moralization of the human spirit is the fact that our stronger animal selves have been suppressed and not allowed to thrive. This has led to what Nietzsche called a bad conscience, a will to self-torment. You have instincts that you wish to follow, but you don't, because morals and socialization have told you that they are bad. You've been domesticated yourself by this moralizing. You do not follow your instincts because of a fear of punishment and laws that can be brought against you. This threat of punishment stole you away from your base instincts and made you safer to be around, made you more lethargic and easier to predict in your behaviours. It made you the sheeple that I've already mentioned many times. This domestication has been important for the building of societies, but it has turned you into a guilt-ridden, suffering beast, dependent on others to lead you through religious or through civic order. The problem with domestication is that it doesn't make stronger, more independent creatures. It makes sickly, weakened ones that are safer to be around in large numbers. The fear of breaking the rules you. You have depressive emotions based on those fears, and worries are created around those moralistic rules that have been made to keep you on the socially acceptable straight and narrow. You are a tamed human being. You now think and consider too much. You rely too much on your consciousness to make decisions for you, and you no longer use the guide that has been there for always. Your animal side. Yes, it is there, and it can overrule your human side, but when this happens, you just become guilty and depressed, not being able to beat the animal inside all the time. You don't celebrate that animal. You bury it and pretend that the drives that it follows are base and unwanted. Sometimes it's right to follow your animal instincts, and they have the right to rule over you, but with following them we may allow our beast within to be brought back to the surface. The bravest of us will allow that beast to rise through and confront it and use it in life. Hiding the beast away and not celebrating it will lead to depression and loss. In a perfect world, man would celebrate these basic instincts, celebrate them and use them to evolve in themselves towards a future where the instincts align with the needs and the wants of people. Humans squash and quell these base instincts thinking they are bad. Your animal side has been the reason you've got to this socialized and cultural stage. You should not turn your back on your animal side, but work with it like I do, to celebrate the instincts, to enjoy them and use them for a better life. In the past, it was the done and acceptable thing to seek glory and get notoriety in the world. These days, people are satisfied with a comfortable life. Sadly, people abandon this freedom and just become a function as they move through life. They give up thinking and acting for themselves and just accept the direction afforded to them by work or life in general. They become a passive reflection of their constructed environment. So in my mind, you are a fucking outbreak that the environment had not been able to respond to quick enough to keep it in check. Even as a hunter-gatherer, you ruined entire ecological realms, changing them forever. A monkey-sized virus. Yet laughingly, because of your quick evolution, you still do it, all within the fear-based position of a prey species. No ultimate confidence in your path. You are frightened for the continuation of your life. That's why you try so hard to steal the lives of others. Oh, and you do not limit it to other species. You are quite happy to destroy entire populations of your own species. If you can identify differences between your particular people and those particular people, then you are willing to kill for those differences. This destruction of your own is also easier if they have the resources that your people need. Let's look at what you did when you discovered South America. You killed off 90% of the population by just arriving. You arrived with new diseases that the local people had no coping strategies for or immunity to. A little exploring and plundering group set sail from Cuba in March of 1520. They had less than 1,000 people in their party, and they had come to seek their respective fortunes in this new continent. They rocked up on the shore of Mexico with ballistic weapons, horses, and more importantly, a slave carrying the smallpox virus. He wasn't sick himself at this point. It was just sitting there, ready to do its diseasey thing when ready. The carrier was a slave. Let us not even start on the slavery of your own species at this juncture. Let's just concentrate on the killing off of your own species in huge numbers. The poor slave soon became sick, and the virus came to the surface of his skin in the wonderfully disgusting pustules that this disease causes. The disease was then released into this new habitat of excitingly unprepared victims. He was taken into a local native home to be cared for, and soon infected the family, who in turn infected those around them. Within a couple of weeks, the town's population was wiped out, and those running away from the infection had the dubious honour of taking the disease with them. The Spanish could not have made a better weapon for the task of mass genocide if they tried. Soon the refugees from those infected towns moved across the continent, taking the gift of smallpox with them as they travelled. Tens of thousands were killed and bodies laid where they fell, as there was no one to deal with them, adding to the pestilence and the disease. By September of the same year, the virus entered the Aztec capital. This city was far different and much more impressive than any of the European cities the Spanish had seen. Long boulevards and many linked islands were found within its bound, a truly beautiful place in comparison to the European cesspits of the day. The city was clean and well maintained, a very healthy city. It even had its own zoo. The Spanish could not believe the city was real, and believed it to be enchanted or that they dreamed it. The clash of cultures was very significant. The Spanish saw this amazingly wealthy city festooned in gold and silver. The Aztecs, however, saw these audacious Spanish arriving on horses that they'd never seen before and carrying new and intriguing weapons. The city's population of 250,000 people soon succumbed to the disease. A third of its folk were destroyed. Cortes had got lost in the lack of communication between Montezuma and his people. This was not communication between two countries that shared a border and a common or close language. They were completely different. They had to have Spanish translated into Mayan, then Mayan translated into Aztec. The outcome of this miscommunication was that the Spanish had thought the Aztecs had surrendered the city to them. In contrast, the Aztec king Montezuma thought he had accepted the surrender of the Spanish. The Spanish took the king and his nobles hostage and effectively ran the country, with Montezuma being the puppet leader of the Spanish. In a period of 10 months, the population of the empire decreased from 22 million down to 14 million. Smallpox was only the beginning of the people's misery. Then came the flu, then the measles. All this death from disease went on while Spanish helped themselves to the resources of the nation. These separate but deadly diseases all took their sector of that population. By 1580, experts have guesstimated that the population of the native people had fallen to 2 million, mainly through losses to disease. Now, you may make the argument that this genocide was not your fault, but I disagree. I suppose if you said that even if you had gone out there to be friends that the same thing would have happened, that the people would still have been exposed to these issues, these horrible diseases, well, that may be true. But in this case, the Spanish wanted to occupy and take over the continent, not befriend the population. If they'd not had the diseases on their side, they would have eventually achieved the same results in a much longer time using sword, musket and fire. Maybe the Aztec gods did their respective followers a favour with these diseases, taking the population away from abuse, slavery, and finally the protracted suffering offered by the Spanish invaders. Now, you only get worse when you become farmers. Up to now, you'd bimbled around the countryside hunting and gathering and staying in small tribes. At this point, this way of collecting food and living was enough to support your needs. About 10,000 years ago, you took a significant step backwards and started to manipulate the lives of animals and plants to suit your needs. You went from happy hunters to miserable, busy farmers, and really there is little evidence as to why. It's all thought to have started in southeast Turkey, although we see evidence of it around the world. The first things thought to be domesticated by man were wheat and goats. Between 10,000 years BC and 3.5 BC, most of the plants and animals that we see domesticated in our modern farms became domesticated. This was a very large development in a very short amount of time. Here I note a very frightening statistic. 90% of the calories we consume in our modern time are from a handful of plant species domesticated back then: rice, maize, wheat, millet, potatoes and barley. No newly significant calorie providing species have been added to our domesticated lists since then. As with what we call scientific memes, farming started all around the world at a similar time, and it soon became the way that most populations fed and clothed themselves around the world. It really was a fast and all-encompassing revolution. In some places on the globe, the farming revolution could not go ahead for a couple of reasons. One was that the area was unable to be farmed due to climatic or geographic restrictions. Another reason was that humans could not domesticate the plants and animals of that place. Some plants and some animals are just not able to transition to a life of being herded or planted, in strict concordance with the subjection of humans. Many think that this agricultural revolution was a huge step forward, fueled by Homo sapiens' intellect. People could now control nature instead of living in coexistence with it. The majority of people think that farming was a giant leap for mankind, that it made life easier, that it meant less stress and more free time and shit like that. It actually produced the opposite outcome. You got dirtier and more diseased. You stayed in one spot, in your own filth. Hunter-gatherers moved on from sites that they dirtied. Farmers did not. They moved away from their filth. Farmers wallowed in it. You got hungrier and gained a greater risk of starvation from farming. Issues arose that if your single crop or small variety of crops failed, that you had no food. You could not replace them with other things because you could not get them from anywhere. You also got much unhealthier due to the lack of variety in your diet. The variety of food sources of a hunter-gatherer's diet gave them a much better spread of nutritional factors. Basically, the monkey went from a much healthier lifestyle and got put into something that in fact was much unhealthier for them. You were fucking tricked into believing it was better for you in lots of ways. What was it that made you do it then? Well, you were outclassed mentally by plants. That's how intelligent you really are. You were outwitted by wheat, a grass plant domesticated by you. This wheat plant, a shitty little weed species grain that you find really hard to digest even after cooking, in a very short amount of time, got you to look after it. You now grow it in huge concentrations all across the globe. You protect it from disease by producing toxic chemicals to pour on it. You collect shit from the floor to feed it. You actually take the shit of other creatures from the floor and give it to this organism to help it grow. Disgusting, in this unhumble werewolf's opinion. You can give thanks now to one of the biggest cunts that ever lived, Fritz Haber, for the method that can fix nitrogen so that a fucking plant can absorb this as an inorganic nutrition. This man devised his process to produce ammonia needed for explosives in World War I. The Allied powers stopped Germany getting the needed ammonia shipped in as a resource through the blockades, so he invented his method so that he could get the Germans the stuff they needed to continue the war. I mean, this twat got a Nobel Prize for this process in 1918 when he had developed it for killing people. This same process is now thought to help feed half the population of the world. If it were not for this inorganic method of producing fixed nitrogen, the crops we require to feed us would not be anywhere near enough to cover the calories needed. This cunt was also the father of chemical warfare. He was the man who weaponized chlorine gas to clear out Allied trenches. He was personally there at the Second Battle of Ypres as they released the gas towards the Allied lines. They waited for the wind to blow in the right direction. Then he was happy to see the clouds of chlorine waft across the battlefield. Once it had reached the trenches, it was drawn into the lungs, where it burned and damaged the mucous membranes, causing the lungs to flood with fluid, so the poor bastards drowned on their own body fluids. It also burnt the eyes and killed or wounded in the most horrible of ways. He's a nice guy, eh? He, as an added bonus, famously did the maths that worked out that a long-term exposure to a small amount of the poison gas would be as effective in killing large numbers of soldiers as would a large concentration over a short period of time. Ironically, he was a Polish Jew, which meant this Germany-loving man who killed for his country, produced illegal gas weapons that had horrendous effects on people, then had to flee from the fatherland as he was now a hated part of the community. If he'd not have left, he would have been killed for his religious beliefs. This proper dickhead is who these fucking plants are willing to use to survive and prosper. You weed and water these self-interested bastards, stripping the land of any plant or animal that can compete with them for resources. You've changed the whole courses of rivers to serve them water. The consequence is that wheat has become exceptionally successful. That is, if we think of a species' success being related to sheer numbers of the organism alive at one time. As a result of wonderful agriculture, you have the maladies that this lifestyle incurs as you're not evolved to be a farmer. You are not evolved to carry buckets of water or to be taking rocks out of the ground. Your anatomy is not suitable for ploughing or building fences. Due to agriculture, your backs are wrecked and you suffer from the tasks that you have to undertake. Your body is not really meant to be doing hour after hour of lifting and carrying, bending backs and back-breaking work. So it seems very foolish that you decided to give up your time-rich hunter-gatherer lifestyle in order to become stressed-out farmers with no time and bad backs. Well, it meant you could grow your population massively. A similar-sized piece of land would give you more return from agriculture than it would from foraging, so farmers could produce more children. That's why agriculture worked so well as your population exploded. We saw the world's population of Homo sapiens increase exponentially as a result of farming. The human plague began. A much more unhappy human was produced, but agriculture allowed many more of them. Often, these farmers suffered from hunger and paucity of life, but there could be loads more of you miserable bastards. That's when you started to really wreck stuff about you. The environment was really fucked at this point, never mind global tipping points that are pointed at in the 21st century. It was at this point that we saw the world get shafted by the human disease. You grew in numbers and you raped the earth, putting your plant masters wherever they would grow. You destroyed biomes and habitats, replacing them with monocultures of your crops. You burnt the natural vegetation. The ashes were ploughed into the soil. This would be an initial fertilizer for your lords and masters, but you would need to find fresh ground as the minerals of the soil would soon be used and the dust became sterile. The central belt of North America is a monoculture of wheat for hundreds of miles, field after field of wheat. Billions of individuals of this very evolutionary successful plant. You did not care about the wild species that were there already. In fact, you destroyed them and their homes for your plant overlords. You did this to increase your masters' numbers, which you talk about as increasing yield in a positive sense. You had to do this for wheat in order to let your population grow. Now you spread like a scrofulatic rash across the surface of the earth. You destroy and damage, yet you watch documentaries and support the World Wildlife Fund. What a fucking joke you are. These domesticated species of plants had you in a trap from which you could not extricate yourself. There were now too many of you to go back to the hunter-gatherer lifestyle. The land could no longer support your large numbers, even if you wanted to go back to the old ways. Hunter-gatherers could and are still able to be found, but they're only found in areas where there is no alternative to agriculture. The master plants would also allow you to have more children and have them earlier, not seasonally. You could now manage to have them at any time in the year. This would mean that over your lifetime, you could have many more children and again increase the human population at a logarithmic rate. You stupid monkeys with your big brains and consciousness and stuff were outwitted by grass. Your life was now much more difficult, nastier and shorter, yet you could not do anything about it. The humans would work to improve their lot. You constantly tried changing methods of farming to increase the yields gained. This led to less free time and more hard back-breaking work. Agriculture meant a lot more mouths to feed. With more mouths to feed, the farmers would have to increase yields to satisfy them. These new mouths were now weaned too early and in turn became competition for resources with each other. This often meant that the populace that required food did not get enough in the way of sound nutrition. As a result, we saw the weakening of humans as a species, reducing the efficacy of their immune system and actually causing a huge percentage rise in the death rate of farmers in comparison to the hunter-gatherers of old. Oh, don't get me wrong, there are still hunter-gatherers in the world, but these are only found in areas where cultivation is not possible. Also, with many more people and the inability to move, if threatened, the farmers became more prone to violence. With a hunter-gatherer lifestyle, if your big bad neighbours attacked and came into your territory at that moment, you could simply do what you always did and move on. Not so for the farmers. They had to defend their turf, as it were. So you fought more often, and the outcome of those battles was much more significant to your group. If you lost your land, you would probably lose all and be at high risk of starving as a tribe. This was the first advancement, an advancement that caused much more hardship in the long term. Humans became evolutionary successful if we look at sheer numbers and take that as a measure of success. But in reality, it bred you to be weaker and less content as a species. You became even more of a pathetic bitch to grass. You then also domesticated animals as a sideline to your agricultural life of plants. You probably started selecting certain sections of the herds that you hunted. You would take the older animals and the males, leaving the young and females so that there would always be more to take. You then probably protected the herd. You then probably corralled the herd so that they were limited in their movements. Then you actively selected for what you wanted from your animals. You would choose some for food and some for their muscle power and help you in your transportation and farm work. You would maybe select for the less aggressive. You were actively killing those that displeased you, and you became an Old Testament god for your own herds. About 10,000 years ago, there were maybe 1 million sheep made up of many different species. They were found in very restricted niches in Afro-Asia. Now, the progeny of those ancient sheep can be found anywhere around the world and are found in the billion, if not billions. There is also thought to be about 1 billion fucking cattle and more than 25 billion chickens. Surprisingly, you homos are the most common large mammal on the planet. Domesticated sheep, pigs and goats are found in the largest numbers of all the planet's large animals. That's incredible to contemplate. They have found massive evolutionary success, again, if sheer numbers of an organism are a measure of that success. Chickens have done exceptionally well in comparison to all other fowl species in the numbers that they exist in, although the life of these creatures is short and nasty, but that's okay though. You humans don't give a fuck about suffering chickens. I mean, your morals and your ethics don't include a bit of foul suffering. Oh, and vegans at this point, shut your hole. Do some reading on the damage that your lifestyle causes before you start to feel good about yourself. The best thing that a vegan can do is die. That way they shut the fuck up about being a vegan and they do not kill any more things while they live. You store most chickens in cages where they can't move or ever experience the outside world. They have been selected to grow exceptionally quickly and produce a lot of breast meat and thigh meat. Often the chickens grow at such a speed that they are unable to support their own body weight. This, combined with the fact that they cannot move to get any exercise, means they often collapse under their own weight. They sit piled on each other in cages in their own and others' mess. That's okay though, as a chicken, which is bred to be roasted, is killed at 24 weeks. Can you believe that? 24 weeks. A horrific but thankfully short life. The lifespan of a chicken in the wild should be 7 years or so. Pigs are held in crates in which they cannot turn around and are used for breeding many litters of piglets a year. Pigs are thought to be as intelligent as dogs, if not more so. Yet we trap these inquisitive animals in a steel trap that holds them so they can only stand and feed piglets. They are even stopped from turning around and are often held in the dark for the majority of the day. That's okay though, isn't it? Isn't it? Enjoy your bacon sandwich, you humanitarian hypocrites. Dairy cattle are treated much more nicely. Oh, wait a minute. No, they're fucking not. They're tortured, kept trapped and constantly pregnant, so they're always lactating to produce milk for human consumption. The young that they do bear are ripped away from them, often killed. So humane, yes. The animals are not treated with respect, they are treated as a product. The machines that milk them have to be attached to non-hairy teats. So the most common way to get rid of the hair in the area is not by the gentle wisp of the barber's razor, but by the heated waft of a blowtorch over the area to singe away the hairs. Yeah, you heard that right. Singe off the hair. Yet most of you just accept that this is okay, if you knew it was happening. As your species so-called succeeds, then everything else, species-wise, suffers. You started to take over the earth. The surface of the earth is mostly water. It has some 60 million square miles of land that is available to us. By the 1400s, the scientifical people guessed that the entire land use by farmers was some 4.5 million square miles. This was roughly 2% of the Earth's surface. The reason for this was that with those early farming systems and techniques, everywhere else was unable to be used. As agriculture developed, a lot of new stresses on human life were created. You now had to worry about the future. You had to prepare and plan for your future. Things such as when to harvest had to be considered. All had to be planned. You then had worries that went with this, not the stress of the attacking tiger, but the stress of things like, will rainy season come on time? Will the local barbarians come and steal our food reserves? Will the storms flatten our crops? Will the locusts eat the wheat? Lots of worries came with looking into an unsure future filled with fear. This was new and very different to the worries of our hunter-gatherer societies that only looked ahead in short stretches. The human body is not supposed to be under this constant stress load. This kind of worrying can and does make you ill, and it plays on your little minds and saps your already poor physicality. Then it took another step. The excess food and production never made the life of the peasants any better. The excesses were in reality taken up by the bullying elites, the newly created religious leaders, kings and nobles. 90% of all the people until quite recently were just poor peasants surviving on what little they had and scraping a living from the earth. The creation of excess meant the elite classes could form and take that excess. They were leaving the peasants living in subsistence while they tended to live, well, again, in excess. Also, with this excess and the development of transport and commerce, the people could live in bigger and bigger conurbations. Villages, towns and cities grew up to deal with these new things. The political world became important, and countries and designations of people were drawn up. These lines in the sand became zones of contention and wars and determined dialogue between those that separated themselves and defined themselves as special of that place. New myths were created for the people to follow. Religion became bigger and government systems were created. Nationalism and nationhood came about, as well as financial and commercial systems. This allowed the mass cooperation of the monkey society to begin and the ruining of the planet to go into overdrive. Society became larger, moving from small tribal groups of under 100 to kingdoms and then into empires, where millions of people of all different types were brought under single banners. This sounds all very nice, but the elites were using those that they deemed below them to fund their lifestyles and the things that they needed. Your lords still use and abuse you every day. The lords con you with their made-up nonsense that keeps you in line.
Brought to you in association with Grendel Press. This is Werewolf the Podcast, a serial killer drama.